Thank you for viewing this recording of a free event provided by Next Village San Francisco for our community. Next Village San Francisco is a local nonprofit providing services and support that empowers seniors to live independently in their own homes. We welcome people who want to keep connected with their community as members, volunteers, and supporters. We host 30 to 40 free activities and events each month for the public, and our members have access to our network of volunteers. Learn more and get involved at nextvillagesf.org. We hope you enjoy this video.
And welcome everyone to part 4 of 5 of the Panama Pacific Exposition, 1915 San Francisco World's Fair. And I know some of you attended parts 1, 2, and 3. And that's when we explored how and why San Francisco hosted a World's Fair. 11 months. February 20th to December 4th, 1915. And in parts 1, 2, and 3, we explored the avenues, the palaces, the pavilions, and the Joy Zone. And we were there on the last days after the lights went out. And I have to say, as fascinating as parts 1, 2, and 3 were, I was really interested in researching the legacy because of what you're looking at now. Absolutely stunning World's Fair. And let's take note of the lower right, where we can see one of the most beloved structures of the fair, and that was the Palace of Fine Arts. And it is ensconced by its lagoon. Then and now. This is a stunning Bernard Maybeck creation. And many people, most of us, I think, may think of this as the only remnant, the only legacy of the fair, but it is not. And today we're going to reveal more of what the fair's legacy is, what happened to the fairgrounds, the art, the buildings. Actually, some ended up going down the bay. One of them ended up in flames, at least one. Some are in a local park, and some of them we still enjoy today. And one of my favorite themes of this topic is what happened to the glorious palm trees on the Avenue of the Palms. And we may be able to solve that mystery today. Maybe. And so I'm interested in the legacy. We are, because look at this. Over 600 acres along 3 miles. 19 million people from all over the world came to the Jewel City for 11 months. So clearly this must have left something behind. So in my research into the legacy, I uncovered some interesting items, and this is one of them. This is 2 pages from a 188-page book, published 1916, titled, long title, The Legacy of the Exposition, Interpretation of the Intellectual and Moral Heritage Left to Mankind by the World Celebration at San Francisco in 1915. Now, this is a stunner. This book contains the thoughts, you see 2 thoughts on the right, of over 670 people that participated, including Luther Burbank, Thomas Edison, George Hubble, and John Philip Sousa. And I'm going to read the foreword. I love my quotes. You will see that going forward. This is from Exposition President Charles Moore. He summed it up very nicely when he said, "The effect wrought upon human progress and world betterment by the Panama Pacific International Exhibition has been bequeathed to the children of men and women, and the heritage of millions who came to drink inspiration from the fountains of this great world university." I mean, wow. Okay, so here are some of the 19 million people. I just wanted to include these again to make my point. A lot of folks. Top photo is Scott Street, and the bottom photo is this is opening day. Attendance 65,000. closing day was actually 460,000, which is equal to the city's population at that time, which was 845,000. So how did a city 7 by 7.5 square miles move 19 million people over 11 months? Okay, moving on to the legacy. Well, San Francisco was the city that knows how, and it was up to the challenge. The streetcars were the most efficient mode to move those 19 million people. So the city acquired 125 streetcars, and that fleet lasted a legacy for decades. At the lower right, you can see there were even streetcars on Columbus. That would be a joy, wouldn't that, to have that back? And they were also on Broadway. And the one in North Beach, lower right, that is the Municipal Railway E-Line, established specifically for the fair. It ran from the ferry building to the Presidio. The Stockton Tunnel. Yes, indeed. The Stockton Tunnel was constructed in 1914, we see here. It was built in part for the fair, so the F line could provide better access to the fairgrounds. So those muni improvements ended up encouraging residential and retail development in areas like Cabo and the marina. And the city was left for decades with a series of streetcars, a streetcar system that was really quite special. And there was another tunnel that's still there. This is the Fort Mason Railroad Tunnel and the tracks. Some of that is still there. The tunnel is behind that fence, which I really wanted to get over and tried. But anyway, the tunnel is still there. The railway connected the Presidio with the Embarcadero. So it shipped supplies to build the fair. Another railroad was the Overfair Railway during the fair, but there is a legacy. This was the brainchild designed and built by an Oakland resident named Louis McDermott, and he was commissioned by the Exposition Company to design this 1/3 scale model of Southern Pacific locomotives. And it ran between Fort Mason and the Presidio. That must have been absolutely a joy. And actually, you can see below, some of his cars are really still functioning. They are part of the Swanton Pacific Railroad Society Museum in San Luis Obispo. Still there, still working. But there was another impressive bit of machinery, and that was the aeroscope, seen at the right. It was one of the many accomplishments of the man on the left, George Strauss. And if the name is familiar, it might be because Strauss would become the chief engineer for the Golden Gate Bridge. But before he did that, he designed the aeroscope. So I'm going to read from a 1915 article, quote, "What the Ferris wheel was to the Chicago World's Fair, the aeroscope is to the San Francisco World's Fair. It became one of the most popular and the safest attraction, and it carried 50,000 passengers in the first 3 weeks." Here we see another view. It looks a little daunting, and it gets more daunting. How about this? The aeroscope cage was lifted with the steel arm, but the cage, shocking, could seat 118 passengers and would rise to a distance of 265 feet. The car, which you can see up there, had 2 floors on it, and it was protected by glass and steel. And it was arranged so passengers really had quite a view, as you can see on the right, of the exposition. And the view clearly of the exposition, the city, so high that you could see Mount Tamalpais, Marin, and Contra Costa. So it towered. And one of the things it towered over was this thing. It was known as the Tin Barn. After the fair, it was in 1919, it was purchased by the James Brown Cattle Company, and it was transported by rail, and it was used as a working barn. It was transported to Monterey County. Now, William Randolph Hearst bought the property, and he continued to use the barn for his cattle company called the Piedmont Cattle Company. So then we had World War II, and the U.S. War Department purchased the property from Hearst in 1940, and it became part of Fort Hunter Liggett. And the barn was and is still used for a variety of activities, including the Post Exchange, a theater, a library, and a gymnasium, and now it is a fire station. The Tin Barn. Now, these guys, these elephants, were not housed in the barn, but they were decorative sculptures. They were elephants that held, you can see them on the left, that held up a flagpole, a 100-foot flagpole in the court of the universe, designed by architect William Faville. Now that's important because he, well, first of all, he was a noted architect. He designed the Geary Theater and the St. Francis Hotel. So when the fair was over, Faville was distraught that they might be destroyed, and so too special. So Faville had them moved to his hometown of Sausalito. Now, sadly, the elephants were not designed to last. They began to deteriorate, but then they were recast in concrete, and they are now in a park in Sausalito. It is the Vina del Mar Park on Bridgeway in Sausalito, and hopefully they'll be there for 100 more years. You can see them recast at the right in the park, and they're there. I have seen them. Stunning. Oh. This is another beautiful statue that I've mentioned in parts 1, 2, and 3. It's called The End of the Trail by James Earl Fraser. It won one of the most prestigious prizes at the fair. And this sculpture depicted a weary Native American man wearing only a blanket and carrying a spear. He's hanging limp on an exhausted horse that came to the edge of the Pacific Ocean. And the man is based on a real person, an important person, Seneca Chief John Big Tree. So in September 1919, that, of course, after the fair, the plaster statue, it did maintain itself for quite a few years. The plaster statue found a new home. We see it at the right in Visalia's Mooney Grove Park. It did begin to deteriorate, but it was replaced with the bronze version that we see here. Now, this statue is so important, so touching, absolutely breathtaking, that it has been replicated many times in different forms, mostly bronze. But that is quite the legacy. So, statues, moving statues and art is one thing, but moving a building is quite the other. This is the Ohio building. It was a replica of the Ohio State Capitol at the fair. And what we see here is the Ohio building on August 16th, 1916, as it's floating down the bay. I wanted to say the river, but oh well. And it's moving to San Carlos. So what happened was that after the fair, it was purchased at auction for $1,000. And the Chronicle, and I quote, says, the Ohio building will float past the ferry building on a 23-mile voyage down to San Carlos. Everything is in readiness for one of the strangest spectacles ever witnessed on San Francisco Bay. Unusually strong winds did move the floating edifice, past its destination, and it almost collided with the Dumbarton Bridge. I love these two photos. Stunning. Anyway, so that end quote, sorry. So the plan had been to make it into the Peninsula Country Club of San Carlos. We see where it was dropped off there in San Carlos on the left. But what happened is it became a speakeasy during Prohibition. And later, oddly, it became a machine shop. I'm going to quote again, one of my favorite things to do. Quote from a newspaper of the day: slowly deteriorating in 1957, it lasted quite a while. It was declared a fire hazard and razed by the county. As more than 2,000 people watched, workmen poured fuel on the faded pink and white structure on the San Carlos mudflats and then set it on fire. Flames spread quickly through the dry timber, sending up a column of smoke, rubble, and ash. The old landmark was put to torch to make way for an asphalt plant. I'm still quoting. The Ohio building, memento of the 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition and a peninsula landmark for 40 years, was burned yesterday in the name of progress. Something else that was moved, I found. At the left, at the low front left foreground, that's the word, we can see the Japanese tea house, part of the Japanese exhibit in the front there. Well, after the fair, the structure was purchased by a Mr. Swift. He was a local land baron who used a barge to transport it to Belmont, where, according to the Van's Restaurant website, Swift's daughters used it as a residence for years. But in 1921, it was moved again, top of the hill, where it is now. And according to the historic documents, people took a trolley from San Francisco to Redwood City to get what was in the 20s called Elsie's. A lady named Elsie Smuck bought the building and turned it into a speakeasy. But when Prohibition ended, she turned it into a legalized saloon and eventually sold it, and it became the Italian restaurant called Giovan's, which was later shortened to the Vans. That's according to their website. So apparently, even residential units is still existing in San Francisco have a PPIE connection. A presentation attendee, I think it was part 3, she shared that these Union Street flats have a connection to the fair. They were built in 1919 by the Rousseau brothers, who were noted architects, home builders. And they remain, what happened apparently was that when the Rousseau brothers, what they used was reclaimed wood beams, posts, and a lot of wood salvaged by architects from the PPIE buildings to build these flats. So I want to thank Maria for sharing that bit of history. Now, these are really quite lovely. I like the flats and all, but how about this for a building? Wow. This is a bit of a different scale. Top photo, French Pavilion. And if these two structures look very similar, they should, because Alma Spreckels was besotted with the work of the French sculptor Auguste Rodin. And so much so that she arranged for a number of her Rodin sculptures and works of art to be exhibited at the fair. So she was so impressed, also, in addition to that, she was so impressed with the beauty of the French Pavilion at the fair, top photo, that she commissioned George Applegarth to design a new museum as a 3/4 scaled adaptation of the French Pavilion. And the museum at the bottom, That is the Legion of Honor Museum. And what Spreckles did was that she included in the museum's collection more than 90 Rodin sculptures, including, of course, a 1904 casting of the Thinker in the courtyard. But these are so similar, really quite stunning, the two views. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. Now, this is not as grand, of course, as the Legion of Honor, but believe it or not, this building, which is still there, 216 Pine Street, this was the Exposition building. What did that mean? Well, the Exposition Company had all their meetings and all their planning sessions in this building. It was the headquarters for the Exposition. So I'm telling you, when you walk by there, you can imagine notables from the Exposition Company coming and going to their meetings to plan that fabulous fair, still there. And what's still around, note the telephones at the lower right, still around. Those are the actual phones used by Alexander Graham Bell when he made the first transcontinental telephone call from the fairgrounds. So after that, a cross-country call was made every day the fair was open. And the photo at the left, upper left, that is the actual first transcontinental phone call being made. And those are the actual telephones. Oh, another discovery. Across town, I found something very interesting about this building. We know this building as the Civic Auditorium. Well, Bill Graham, but never mind. Civic Auditorium is what it will always be. But it wasn't always the Civic Auditorium, because if you look at the image on the bottom, what does it say carved into the structure over the main entrance? It says Exposition Auditorium. Yes, originally this was not the Civic Auditorium, it was the Exposition Auditorium. And the Exposition Company, and they held meetings there, and other events associated with the fair. And after the fair was over, the building was gifted to the city. And so beautiful and special was that building that many postcards were designed. And the lower, on the bottom photo is a postcard of opening day, beautifully landscaped in front of the Civic Auditorium. Now, these postcards are available. They're collectible. They're beautiful. The color is radiant. And there was another very special building associated with the fair, the Tower of Jewels. These are postcards of the Tower of Jewels. And it's a stunner for many stunning reasons, but some of the most memorable and collectible reasons are over 100,000 Nova gems that shimmered in the sunlight during the day and by floodlights in the evening. And these postcards are available and collectible. Now, the Tower of Jewels towered over the fairgrounds, 435 feet, over 100,000 Nova gems shown. These Nova gems, we see a collection at the right, were created by Walter Ryan in a variety of colors and sizes. And each of the gems was actually mounted to the building on a brass hanger. You can see that hanging on the upper right. And they moved in the breeze. They also had glass behind them. So imagine over 100,000 Nova gems reflecting in the searchlights and in the sun, and they were breathtaking. And the Nova gems are quite the legacy and very much sought after, still available. Also part of the legacy are these special issue stamps and coins. And the quoting from the U.S. Mint document, the Secretary of State shall cause to be coined at the United States Mint at San Francisco. Remember that? We had a mint in, oh, we have several. At San Francisco, 3,000 $50 coins, 10,000 $2 coins, and 25,000 $1 coins. Now, the coins can be had for $2,000. Lower photo, those are $2,000, and the stamps upper around 600. Another part of the legacy. And an attendee mentioned her collection of PPIE dishes. This really photo doesn't capture the beauty of the blue Rolt and Marcellus of Staffordshire, England dishes. This is a 10-inch cobalt blue, $60, which is pretty reasonable actually. But I'm thinking to put on this plate would be one of the recipes from this adorable, delightful little book. It's a cookbook. It's called the Pan-Pacific Cookbook, Savory Bits from the World's Fair, and it's a definite keepsake. A reprint, like mine here, can be purchased. 170 pages of recipes from every participating nation, including recipes: Turkish quail and eggplant, Italian polenta alla Bologna, and English jugged hare. Hare, sort of rabbitish, cooked in a jug. But you would not want to use this vase to cook the hare. This is a beauty, a silver and gold enamel vase designed by Louis Comfort Tiffany. It has been sold. The price, $125,000. And it was one of the pieces displayed at the Palace of Fine Arts. These are the things that were in the Palace of Fine Arts, including, of course, statues and paintings. This is interesting to me. This is a painting by Willard Metcalf. It's titled Salmon River, Norway. It's quite the fine work of art when you see it in person, and I have, because it hangs in the Century Club of California, of which I am a member. The club was founded in 1898 by Phoebe Hearst. So the archives go way back, and we have many historic documents that document the club's involvement in the exposition and their participation. This painting actually was donated by a club member who had attended the fair and purchased it. And now it hangs in the Century Club. So thousands of works of art like this were displayed at the Palace of Fine Arts. But before we delve into the saga of the Palace of Fine Arts, I had to highlight this. Here we see several statues at the Palace of Fine Arts in and around. And if you notice anything similar about all of them, you should. Because the model for these and hundreds of other PPIE statues was a woman named Audrey Munson, seen at the top left. This was quite the beauty. She left quite the legacy, one that survived long after the fair. She died at the age of 105. Audrey was an artist model, and she was considered, I love this, she was called America's first supermodel, the Panama Pacific Girl, the Exposition Girl, and American Venus. You can see why. She was so popular and well established that she was chosen to be the model of choice for most of the sculptors at the PPIE. She was chosen by the director of sculpture, Alexander Sterling Calder. And it is said that her figure, her likeness, was repeated 90 times in just one court of the universe. And I can see why. Many photographs of her online, absolutely stunning. So now we've arrived at the palace. This is a colorized version, beautiful. And we would not have this beyond stunning Maybach creation if it was not for the relentless efforts of hundreds of people over decades. And one of those people was Phoebe Hearst. She's the one that founded the Palace Preservation League even before the fair was over. And there was really quite the campaign to save it, maybe not redesign, but add to its longevity before the fair was over. That had all been planned, so much so that the exposition company designated a number of days when the receipts, the admission receipts, were to be used to preserve the palace. And of course, the Hearst family provided significant funding, and William Randolph provided publicity in his newspapers. So the efforts to save the palace continued for decades. We can see the palace here deteriorating. This is in 1956. The buildings were not meant to last. The palace did very, very well. It lasted quite a while. I think there were efforts made to preserve it all along the way. But in 1959, we see him at the lower right, philanthropist Walter Johnson spearheaded an effort to raise preservation funds and donated $4 million. And we see him at the lower right with California Assemblyman Caspar Weinberger. So in those preservation efforts, what had to be done was to almost completely demolish the original Palace of Fine Arts. This is 1964. And it was demolished, to the point where just mostly only the steel structure was left. Buildings were stripped to their foundations, and they rebuilt a permanent version of Maybach's design. It was reconstructed in steel and cement, as close to the original as possible. So when we're at the Palace of Fine Arts, keep in mind that is not the original at all. Obviously, you see it here. And in January 1965, some of the original masonry we can see in this photo was auctioned. This is the auction. That would have been a delight, wouldn't it, to own parts of the original palace? This helped raise funds for more renovations. But just a few months after the auction, this happened. Now, I don't remember this, and I wish I did, but June 22nd, 1965, fire damaged the palace. Quoting from the Chronicle, the reconstruction of the final structure was not without drama. A fire erupted, causing an estimated $80,000 worth of damage. The blaze started in the plaster mold shop, and the flames fed a butane furnace, and they jumped 60 feet to the ceiling. This is really quite a stunning photograph from the Chronicle. Amazing. We almost lost the palace. But what happened this day? 100 firefighters, 26 pieces of equipment, and 45 minutes to bring it under control. So restoration continued. This is December 1966. The buildings were reconstructed in steel and concrete. And so the palace was restored in the 50s and the 60s, and it went until the 2000s when there were more preservation efforts. They did seismic upgrades, conservation of the dome and the colonnade, and landscape work on the lagoon. So by this time, it had been 90 years since this photograph was taken of the palace at the left. 1918 photo. The palace at the left. In the distance, the column of progress. We are standing at Marina Boulevard and Scott Street. Few buildings still around, but something else was left behind. The palms. on the Avenue of the Palms. We see them in all their glory at the upper left, and we see them the lower in May 1918. Now, I mentioned the Avenue of the Palms in parts 2 and 3. An attendee asked me a very important question. What happened to the palms? Well, it appears in my research that any number of people have delved into the mystery of what happened to these palms. Lots of research, but no conclusive answers. Theories abound, but conclusive answers do not. So let's take another closer look at the mystery of the missing palms. I love it. Love even saying that. Oh. So an attendee suggested that the palms may have been replanted on Mission Dolores. So here we have Mission Dolores palms, 1958, and they are small. They're not full-grown palm trees. And at the right, someone suggested maybe the palms were replanted in Union Square. No, because the lower right is a 1910 photograph, and we see the palms, some palms, lining the north side of the square. So it couldn't have been our palms. But back in 1915, they stood in all their glory on the Grand Avenue, as we see it here. And below, yes, below is approximately the same location as the upper left photo, Scott and Bay Streets. That's a then and now, okay? So when I Google Street View captured the present day scene, I noticed something very interesting. Can anyone notice something very interesting in the lower right photo? I saw 3 very old looking palm trees. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going back to the mystery of the missing palms. Are we about to solve a mystery? Could these 3 palms be our palms? Historic accounts indicate the California Nursery Company in Niles supplied the palms. These are photos from their website. Well, not from their website, but they are contained in one of their catalogs. 1915 catalog reads, in the fall of the year, most of the large palms for the Avenue of the Palms were boxed. This called for about 350 Canary Island date palms and California fan palms. And most of them were shipped from Niles in the spring and summer of 1914. So here we have the palms on a railroad car, and at the left being planted next to the Italian towers we see under construction in the distance. So now we know where the palms came from. And are these them? Look at that. Maybe someone knows more about palms than I do. I'm wondering. During part 3 of the Q&A, someone asked if there was such a thing. Great question. Is there such a thing as plant DNA? Because if there is, I would consider paying for that testing to see if these are them. We're standing at Scott and Bay. Keep in mind that the fairgrounds do exist, but just with different occupants. In 1918, seen here, the Palace of Fine Arts and its lagoon are still there. The Army is back on their land that they leased to the Exposition Company, and the barracks have taken the place of the horticulture gardens. By 1921, a grassy field on which the outline, very faint, of the racetrack could still be seen. That would become Crissy Field. This is a terrific photograph, really very sharp if you're able to acquire this from the Open SF History. Hold on. Let's see what we have here. So now we're looking at 1920, and this is what the Marina District looked like in 1920. This photograph was taken from the Lion Street steps. Notice at the end of Lion Street, the palace is there, and to the right in the distance is the column of progress. And surrounding the column are now the vacant fairgrounds. But they wouldn't stay vacant forever. 1917, Virginia Vanderbilt, she was the largest landowner, announced plans for a subdivision called the Marina Gardens that were designed by landscape architect Mark Daniels. These are Daniels' photographs, renderings of what the Marina Gardens would look like. Well, his plans were not pursued, but he did write a beautifully composed article outlining his plans, which is available online. That's where these images are from. In 1922, the Marina Gardens subdivision was going nowhere. So real estate developer George Bevel and the Rothschild brothers purchased 55 acres of land from Mrs. Vanderbilt, and they built a new subdivision. We can see that subdivision in white outline at the center. And this was the result. By 1937, the Marina District looked like this. Doyle Drive, if we blow this up, is under construction at the approximate location, by the way, of the Fair's Avenue of Nations. Now, Doyle Drive is gone, replaced by the Presidio Parkway, on top of which are the Presidio Tunnel Top Garden. But throughout all the changes, what do we see? The palace still holds its regal place. By this time, 1930s, 75,000 people were the new occupants of the fairgrounds. The fair's racetrack became part of what is now Crissy Field. The historic top image was taken from Fort Winfield Scott, and the breathtaking views have not changed. The North Gardens we see at the top became the Marina Green. The PPIE Harbor, seen at the top, became the San Francisco Yacht Harbor. I love these photos because you can see the Palace of Fine Arts in both of them. Then and now. Can't beat the then and now. And so it's really clear how the 1915 San Francisco World's Fair has clearly left a lasting legacy in photos, books, memorabilia, and palm trees. 19 million people over 635 acres left quite the memory and quite the legacy. I found this article in the December 5th, 1915 San Francisco Examiner really sums it up. It is available online. And I'm doing a quote. We can see the quote here on the screen. It's being read by Exposition President Charles Moore. He said, "The hour has struck, the mighty work is done. Praise God for all the bloodless victories won. And from these courts of beauty, go forth in joy and brotherhood and peace." So next time you're here, then and now, on Marina Boulevard at Baker, you might want to ponder what was there before. You are on what was the Grand Esplanade at the left, the California Building at the right, the Palace of Agriculture, at the end, the Column of Progress. And those of you that attended part 3 know that this Grand Esplanade is my favorite photo. This photo. Love, love, love. And that's why I'm going to end part 4 with the same image I always end up with. This image of a gloriously planned and executed World's Fair.
Thank you for viewing this Next Village video recording. We hope you enjoyed it. Please help us spread the word and tell friends and neighbors about Next Village events and services for seniors and adults with disabilities in San Francisco. Visit our website to learn more about our vibrant, growing network, as well as to view our calendar of upcoming Zoom and in-person events and activities in San Francisco. Our website is nextvillagesf.org. Contact us to join our email list to learn about events and resources for seniors in San Francisco. And subscribe to the Next Village YouTube channel by clicking the button below.